White Bird Chapter 4. No one talked to Tortu, but everyone talked about him. I heard he caught it from his father, was what Sophie said. She balled up her hand into a twisted fist, hunched her back, and contorted her face into a gargoyle's grimace. Everyone laughed. No one pointed out that, in fact, Tortu's upper body was just like anyone else's. The disease had only affected his legs. I don't think that's how polio works, I said, and made a mental note to ask Papa. It's true, insisted Sophie. Everyone knows that. Marianne wrinkled her nose. I don't know how you can stand to sit next to him, Sarah. He spells of merde. He gets that from his father too, added Sophie. He works in the sewers, and his whole family has to live down there together. They have their own special fragrance. Eau de Gautier. She pretended to dab fancy perfume behind her ears. It's all the rage in Paris, she continued. Try it. You too can smell like a sewer worker. Everyone laughed, including me. After all, the idea of bottling that particular scent was funny. I wanted to point out that Tortu did not smell like the sewers, and I doubted that he or anyone else actually lived down there, but before I could get up the nerve to open my mouth, I heard a small voice behind me. Excuse me, Sarah. I glanced over my shoulder and was surprised to find Tortu propped up on his crutches, hanging back at the edge of my circle of friends. I felt a flash of guilt, wondering if he'd heard us make fun of him. Ew, what does he want? Asked Sophie, raising a critical eyebrow. I shrugged lightly, but I turned to face him. I noticed that Tortu was extending a hand towards me. In it was a slim brown notebook. You dropped your sketchbook between our desks, he said. Behind me, Sophie whispered loudly to Marianne. I can smell him from here. Thanks, I said flatly, taking my sketchbook from him. I was genuinely grateful to get it back, but I knew that expressing anything other than disdain would inspire more jokes at his expense and mine. You're welcome, he replied with a polite bow. Tortu turned and went on his way. That was the first time I'd ever spoken to him in all the years that we'd sat beside each other. I quickly turned away too, only to see the bemused grins on my friends' faces. I think he likes you, Sarah, teased Sophie. I made a face. Ew, don't say that. Then I laughed at the very idea. Me and Tortu. How ridiculous would that be? I felt a little pang of guilt. Maman would have been appalled if she could see me acting this way, but she never would. And besides, it felt like harmless teasing. What's in that little book of yours anyway? Asked Sophie. Love poems? She struck a pose, nose in the air. Oh, my darling, shall I combine thee to a spiny lobster perhaps? Or, I don't know, a beetle. Mon amour, you and I are. Speaking of poetry, I interrupted, eager to change the subject. Did either of you write down the page numbers for the reading we need to do tonight? Marianne opened her notebook to look it up, but before she could give me the assignment, I heard the distinctive sounds of a schoolyard scuffle behind us. 3 older and larger boys surrounded Tortu. One of them was named Vincent. He was tall and handsome, with blonde hair and piercing blue eyes. He was the kind of boy I might have written poems for if I did that sort of thing. I was not the only girl in my grade with a crush on him, and I'm pretty sure he knew it. Go home, sewer rat, one of the boys said. The others laughed. I told myself that they were just joking around, like my friends and I had done, but their boyish teasing quickly turned into rough housing. Maybe he just needs a little push, joked Vincent, and the next thing I knew, Tortu was sprawled on the ground. His cap fell off as he toppled over. Vincent snatched it up and tossed it on top of Tortu. Don't forget your hat, he said. Then, to my astonishment, Vincent turned and locked eyes with me. Everything happened so fast, and yet time stood still. My heart started racing as he opened his beautiful mouth and spoke to me for the very first time. Hey, what did the little cripple give you anyway? He asked. My sketchbook, I replied. I could hear Sophie and Marianne over my shoulder. This was totally unheard of. Handsome, popular older boys like Vincent didn't usually notice little mice like me. He held out his hand towards me. Let me see it, he said. Without a word, I complied. Yes, that book held my private thoughts and dreams, my whole imaginary world, and yet I secretly hoped he could see the beauty in it. Maybe he'd even compliment my talent, just as Mademoiselle Petitjean had. I held my breath as he flipped through the pages, his friends peeking in to look. Hey, you're a pretty good artist, he said. He finally said, the corners of his mouth curling up in a grin. Oh, thank you. I started to accept his praise, looking down modestly. For a Jew. The words hit me like a bucket of ice water. Startled, I glanced up and saw that his smile was now a cruel smirk. He threw my sketchbook on the ground like it was garbage and stalked off without another word. Laughing, his friends followed behind him. Sarah, let's get out of here, said Mariam, her hand on my arm. I stood there silently, a tear rolling down my cheek, feeling as if I'd been slapped. I should have said something, I finally whispered. In my head, all sorts of possible responses sprang to mind too late. You jerk, you ought to be ashamed of yourself speaking that way to me. I bet you can't even draw a stick figure. Why had I gone mute? Was I too shocked to respond, or too afraid? It was like the ice cream store incident all over again, only worse. I had a deep and increasing feeling of worry that perhaps he was right, and something was obviously wrong with me. Forget about it, he's not worth it, Mariam told me. I let my friends guide me along, but I felt numb. The sign in the ice cream shop was upsetting, but it applied to all Jews, not just me. This was much worse. It was the first time I had ever personally been the target of anti-Semitism. I felt so humiliated, angry, hurt, to be attacked, not for something I'd done, but for something I was. This was new to me, and it shook me to the core. Don't pay attention to Vincent, said Sophie, her arm draped protectively around my shoulders. He's just a stupid boy. Besides, they say his father works for the Nazis. I shook my head as if to shake off a bad dream. To think I had a crush on him, I said. Put it out of your mind, Sarah, advised Mariam. Easy for you to say, I thought. You're not Jewish. I could not put it out of my mind. After I said goodbye to my friends, I rode my scooter home like always. But suddenly the world seemed different. Everywhere I looked, there were signs. Not omens, but actual signs. I stopped short in front of one in a shop window, the boulangerie, of all places where my family had purchased loaves of delicious bread for years. Staring back at me was a grotesque creature with evil, menacing eyes and a huge crooked nose. It was a poster for a German film called Der Weg Jules, which meant the Eternal Jew. I noticed my horrified reflection superimposed on the glass in front of the poster. Was this how my classmates saw me? I pushed on, going past the cinema where my father and mother sometimes took me, or rather, used to take me. Past Juif, said a banner across the window. No Jews. Just like the sign in the ice cream shop. And everywhere I went, I couldn't escape the sight of those bright red banners flapping in the breeze. When I first saw them, the swastikas reminded me of windmills, but as I learnt what they represented, they seemed more like giant fans with sharpened blades whirling and threatening to cut me if I got too close. I pushed my scooter faster and faster, trying to push all of those horrid images out of my sight. I could no longer pretend my life was normal, not when the world was full of so much hate, not when this hate was coming closer and closer, my eyes filled with tears. This was how Vincent saw me, I suppose, as an awful thing, less than human. I rode the rest of my way home, staring straight ahead to avoid these posters telling me what I quickly realized my life was not a fairy tale anymore, and perhaps it would never be again.